Hello, I'm Michael Mallinoff, and welcome to the special edition of the County Administrator's Report on Video. Hello, I'm Michael Mallinoff, and today we have two special guests. The topic we're going to be talking about is the budget, the FY'19 budget, and our special guests are David Eicholtz and Jenifer Ellin. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Can you tell the folks who are watching, your family members and others, a little bit about yourselves, how long you've been with the county, and what your job titles are? And I ask you that because I might mess it up, so it's better if you say it than me.
Okay, so I am the Director of Fiscal and Administrative Services for the county. And I have been with the county, some people will say as long as dirt. However, I've been with the county for 36 years.
And my title is Chief of Budget, and I've been with the county. I just celebrated my 24th anniversary last month.
Right, and not exactly in line with what Mr. Eicholtz said last year. You're not the oldest person in the department?
No, I've just been there the longest.
You've just been there the longest. Well, welcome you two. And I think every year the most important aspect of our job is putting together our budget. And last night we had our public hearing, and a budget is many things to many people, whether it's numbers, jobs, but it seems to me to reflect our values and where the county wants to head. And can you all give us a little bit of an idea of where the budget is and what's been proposed?
Certainly. The budget is in its home stretch, as I like to call it. We are preparing a presentation, and we've been preparing presentations for the county commissioners. We'll be adopting the budget, hopefully, on May 15th, although that's not a legislative requirement. That's a preference by the board. But we are scheduled to adopt the budget May 15th. As I said, we're in the final stages. The budget currently for the general fund, which is our largest operating budget, is in at just about $401 million, as proposed, as you know, by you, our county administrator. However, obviously, the commissioners could make changes to that proposed budget before they adopt it, again, on May 15th, hopefully.
Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about what you and your team do to put it together?
Certainly. So we actually start this in the fall, and I have my analysts take a look at the existing expenditure patterns, and we make recommendations to the departments. So that's kind of the first stage of it. Then we actually meet with the departments to discuss any new requests and possibly realigning their budget in order for them to afford additional items. After that, we then meet with you. And we go over one more time and set priorities and try to get the budget in balance.
So this year, trying to fit the commissioner's goals in with some fiscal conservative approach, we took a slightly different approach with the departments and our outside agencies that we fund. Can you all describe a little bit about that process so that the viewers can understand how we fine-tune this budget and we're able to achieve what we did without raising property taxes or income taxes?
Yes, so this year we started the process by meeting with the departments and the agencies early, almost before the process started, to share our revenue estimates, to share our outlook with them. We knew it was going to be a tough year, especially as far as trying to raise taxes to generate additional money. So we shared that information with them. We, again, have a modest increase in our revenues projection.
It's what, 2.4%?
2.4%. Again, most of our revenues are generated from income tax and property taxes. So we're pretty much guessing on the income taxes based on historical information, but on the property taxes, we get pretty good information from the State Department of Assessments and Taxation for the state of Maryland. So the property taxes are a little bit more set than the income taxes, but still, those two dictate what our revenue growth is going to be. So we did share that information with all of our major partners, including the Sheriff's Office and the Board of Education, as well as your own departments. We encourage them to look from within their budget to try to address their highest priorities. And that was mainly because everybody doesn't spend 100% of their budget every year. And we receive back at the end of the year millions of dollars in what I call budget savings, an appropriation that wasn't spent. So we explained that to the departments and agencies. We urged them to realign their budget so that these annual savings don't occur as much or less than what it's been happening. And we were able to do that because our fund balance level has gotten to the point where it's reached the stages that are very acceptable, certainly acceptable up in New York, the bond rating agencies. We're in good.
And also the commissioner's policy.
And absolutely.
And how
even
much
more
is that?
importantly. So the commissioner's policy has a target range of 8% as a minimum and 15% as a maximum. We are slightly above the 15%, which, again, according to their policy, they can do many things with that excess savings. Fund balance is another term for savings. However, we would encourage them to keep it to one-time costs. And so it's not something that you can just roll back into annual recurring operating costs like new positions or new programs. So we are structuring that for the commissioners to take a look at and to take a look at one-time costs to use that money. The main point, though, is when we met with the departments and agencies, we suggested to them to look from within their budget and try to address their priorities from within.
Good, good. We'll come back to the priorities because I think that's what most people are interested in, to see what we're spending the money on. But the budget, a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with the fine details. And by that I mean whether the county government is all the budget or whether the other agencies are. Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about the percentage of where the taxpayers' monies go?
So roughly half the budget does go to education, and that's not just the Board of Education. It also includes the library and the College of Southern Maryland. The sheriff is roughly 22% of the budget, and then the county administered departments are the remaining just under 16%. So,
and then debt service
yes,
and other
debt
costs.
service is right under the 8% mark. So, I mean, a lot of the money does actually just flow out to the different agencies.
Mm-hmm. So our budget, the county operating budget, is really about 15 to 16% of the overall budget, and the remaining 85% goes to outside agencies and debt service and otherwise. The other thing about the budget, again for background, is the general fund's not the only part of the budget. A big part of it is our enterprise funds and our capital improvement programs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So our enterprise funds are basically operations that the citizens who use pay for, such as our water and sewer fund. So if you're hooked up to the county's water and sewer system, we have our landfill operations. So when you go to the landfill, you pay a tipping fee. So there's different operations like that that are segregated out of the general fund, and by having separate fees for them, it keeps the burden off of the overall tax increases for like property tax or income tax, because the people paying for the service get the service. Then we have our capital improvement program, which is basically building the infrastructure or really maintaining the infrastructure as well. That program is mainly financed with bond financing. So we go to New York every year and we issue the bonds for it. And then we have to make the debt service payments. So when we start talking about the FY'19 budget, we always have to make sure that we have in there the amount of money we need to make those payments.
So all of that wrapped together, if we do it right, is why we have a AAA bond rating or a triple. And what that is showing the taxpayers and investors that we are a very well-run financial government. And the key to that, or the result of that, is lower interest rates for these projects. So that's something that you two can be very proud of. David, can you talk a little bit about some of the whether it's priorities or some of the highlights of the FY'19 general fund budget?
Certainly, our number one priority is a sustainable budget. So what we don't want to do is present the commissioners one that uses a lot of reserves and has like a one-year program level to it, and then you'd have to make budget cuts. So our number one priority was to make this budget sustainable. With a growth rate of 2.4%, which generates roughly $9 million, it only affords you so much opportunity to add to your programs. So what the one thing we did was provide a step or a merit increase for all employees that we fund, including the Board of Education and the Sheriff's Office.
So that's teachers, sheriff's uniform, corrections, as well as our employees.
That's absolutely correct. What that does, though, is that takes approximately $6.5 million to do that. When your revenues are increasing roughly $9.5 million.
So that leaves you $3 million for everything else.
For everything else, and the number one other priority is we have to pay our debt service on these bonds that we've been issuing that Jenny just described to do our infrastructure. So that took up another $1.4 million for next year. So you're really down to not a lot of working capital to be able to do brand new things or to do everything that people had asked for.
So by allowing the departments or encouraging the agencies or in the departments to look within their budget, because when they're returning the money in years past, it's been going to raise this fund balance. That's helped us with the AAA bond rating. We're not at that point anymore. We don't really need to raise additional. So encouraging them to look from within, what a colleague of mine called budget engineering really has resulted in some interesting new things in the budget. Can you touch on a couple of those items?
Certainly. The big one is to try to get the sheriff some additional help on both the street and in the detention center. They did come back and said we wanted to use some of our savings to address some of their high priority needs, not necessarily from an officer standpoint, but from the support staff standpoint. We took that and made that recommendation to you in our proposed budget as well. But we also proposed that they absorb some more officers, 4 deputies and 4 correctional officers, because we think they have enough savings, because we've seen how much they've been turning back in each year. We think they have enough savings to be able to accomplish that. We've also provided some funding for the health department, for a full-year peer recovery specialist, for some Narcan supplies. That seems to be a very high priority in the community as well right now.
And those are important. The additional 4 uniform officers in the sheriff's office puts it to about 10 officers for the last 4 years, or the term of these commissioners. And that's roughly about what's been done in the prior years. So we've been able to kind of maintain that level of commitment to the sheriff's office. And then the Narcan, the interesting thing about that is I think there's a program where they're going to try to put Narcan and where all our defibrillators are located throughout the county, 50 some odd. So you'll have a defibrillator as well as Narcan in case somebody unfortunately has an overdose related to an opioid issue. And looking ahead to next year's budget and sustainable, there is a big project coming online, and that is the Billingsley Elementary School that the commissioners have funded. Can you talk a little bit, both of you, about the impact of the Billingsley Elementary School on our capital budget, but also our operating budget, and why we always have to look ahead to prepare for the next year?
I'll defer to the lady first and pick it up afterwards.
So on the capital budget, we are proposing the final year of funding for the elementary school, which includes some startup cost one-time items that would be needed to basically open the school and have it fully running with the technology that the Board of Ed is proposing. We are still waiting to get state funding, so sometimes the state funding lags a little bit, so the county did put up the money up front in order to get the school opening when it is. So we're still working with the Board of Ed, and we typically don't really know until we get closer to opening a school actually what the impact will be, because they will transfer teachers from other schools in. But of course we need to provide for the administrative staff and the operating cost of that. So I think that's why when we were working on our FY'19 budget, we had that in mind, because we know it's going to be an impact next year.
Right.
So we didn't want to build things in that were going to have a second year large impact, because we knew that this was coming.
And I understand related to that is costs having to do with the operating budget. And David, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I was just going to say, opening a new school is challenging because in the state of Maryland, the state doesn't give the local school districts more money because they open a new school. So
and in fact, in MACo, Maryland Association of Counties, they're doing, I forget the name of the Kerwin report, which has to do with the funding of schools, and they're trying to look at those issues. And the issue that you're talking about is funding equipment and things like that the state doesn't share.
Well, and not just that, but just teachers, additional teachers, and any operating costs associated with the school, it falls on the local jurisdiction, either the Board of Education or the county, or in many times a partnership, to be able to absorb that extra cost. Now, as Jenny mentioned, a lot of that cost comes in from other schools because they're potentially in a crowded classroom or in a portable classroom. But there are some additional costs anytime you open a new school. So that's why we're not concerned, but see that as a challenge coming down the road because that is 100% on the local jurisdictions. Right.
And one of the things I think in the enterprise funds was an increase in our recycling program.
Yeah, so every year they try to expand the routes and service more customers. We were actually able to fit that in the budget this year without raising the annual fee.
It's very good because I forget the percentage of our solid waste stream that goes into recycling. Off the top of my head, it may be exceeding 40 to 50%, which is above the state average.
I know we're above the state average, well above.
Yeah, and I think that is a good reflection on the quality of the program and the work of the folks over in that department.
Yes.
In closing, I'd like to mention a little bit that we are in the process of setting up 2 workshops outside the normal process this year. Jenifer Harris, who's the new chief of media, came to me and said, this is something I'm used to doing. And in fact was something I had done early in my career, way back in the ether. And I liked them. I mean, they can be challenging because you don't know, but David and Jenny are going to be able to participate in that. And I know they're very much looking forward to it. And I think Commissioner Murphy as well. But those dates are April 19th at 6:30 p.m. at the Waldorf West Library, and April 25th at 1:30 p.m. at the Richard R. Clark Senior Center. And the announcement will be posted around the county and features a very interesting graphic that'll be handed out to libraries and otherwise, but it'll give us an opportunity to talk about the budget and hear from our community so that they can better understand what we're doing. But David and Jenny, I'd like to thank you for coming and giving us a little tutorial. Another aspect of David and Jenny that I try not to hold against them is they're both from the Pittsburgh area, and being a Caps fan, and I know that you, particularly Dave, is a Penguins fan, that we'll have to talk about the upcoming road to the Stanley Cup. And being a Caps fan, I know that can often be disappointing.
We're looking for a three-peat in Pittsburgh. Bring that cup back home again.
Yeah, I hear you. But again, thank you very much. And I look forward to joining you on the budget trail later in the month. I'd like to thank you all for watching this special edition of the County Administrator's Report on video. I'm Michael Mallinoff, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Bye now.